Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Miss Rachel. We're going to be continuing our rainbow color unit, and today we're actually going to be repurposing some old art materials to make new art materials. We are going to be using old and broken crayons. We probably all have some of these at home to make some new crayons of our own. And first we're going to go over the materials that we need for this project. Okay, so if you look on my table, I have a tray for sorting. If you don't have a tray, you can use bowls or just spread out a big piece of paper to sort your crayons on. You're going to need to collect a bunch of old and broken crayons. You're going to need some baking trays, little tin baking trays for the oven. You're going to need some kind of grease or oil because just like when we bake food, we're going to need to grease the baking tins. And this is an optional thing, but we are going to be breaking our crayons for this. So one thing you might want is like a heavy-duty plastic bag for breaking crayons in. And last but not least, the first thing you're going to be using is some kind of bowl for containing hot water. Okay, so now we need to start gathering crayons. And I really am encouraging you to try to use things you already have. So preferably not opening up a fresh box of crayons. If you know that you or people in your household have crayons around the house, now it's time to look in drawers, look where you keep your art supplies, look in the desk, maybe you have some in a shoebox, but you want to gather crayons. It doesn't matter how small the broken pieces are, it doesn't matter how much paper they have on them. You're going to put a little bag together or a bowl together with as many crayons as you can find. Okay, so now we're going to try a little shortcut to help get the paper off our crayons a little bit faster. You're going to need a grown-up to get a bowl and to fill the bowl with hot tap water. It's important that the water was not boiled in a kettle or on the stove because then the crayons will melt and we don't want them to melt yet. But you're going to have the bowl filled up with hot water and we're going to start putting crayons into the water. And this is going to help loosen up the paper on the crayons so that it'll peel off a little bit easier. So you can really fill up that bowl if you want to. I'm just going to scoop crayons of every color in there. And we're going to let it soak for a few minutes. And then we'll try to peel some of these off. So the crayons have been in the water now for about a minute. It doesn't take long at all for things to start getting looser. You can see some of the paper wrappings are coming off all by themselves. Some of them are taking a little longer. I'm still using my fingernail to peel. This one's a little tricky actually, so I'm going to put that one back in the water. So this can be a fun thing to do together. It's almost like peeling vegetables or something. As the paper comes off, you can make a little pile. I'm putting the crayons that are peeled into the center of my little tray, and then I will sort them. Okay, so now we're going to get ready to sort our colors. This is a good time for us to go over the colors on the color wheel that we learned at school earlier this year. So my students, when we started our color inquiry, were exploring a large color wheel that we made out of cardboard, and we were actually matching colors to the corresponding colors on the wheel. So let's start by pulling up the first half of the color wheel, which is the warm colors. All right, so our warm colors are red, orange, and yellow. Okay, and I think that's a good place for us to start with sorting. So whatever you're using, you can start trying to separate colors. And this tray has some really big sections. So I might just actually like put two colors in the section. I think I'm going to put the red on one side and the orange on the other. And if they, get a little mixed up together, that's okay. Now, as I'm looking here at my crayons, I can see that I have some colors that might be a little bit more tricky to sort. They might be between two colors. When we were using our color wheel at school, we would put a color that we thought was maybe in between two colors. actually right in between it. So that's something you can do. Like I have my red here and my orange here, but if I have something that's more of a red-orange, I can kind of put it right in between. So I'm going to keep sorting these until I have a nice amount. You know, I could do every crayon, or maybe I want to start thinking about another color. I want to add my third warm color in there, which is yellow. I'm going to start putting yellow crayons here next to my orange. We'll keep it going in order. The crayons might feel a little slippery because they're still wet from being in the water. Okay, we have a good amount of yellow now. All right, so let's talk about the cool colors now. All right, so we have the other half of our color wheel. Our cool colors are purple, blue, and green. Okay, and if we actually put the color wheel together, it's a big one. Okay, as we move through our warm colors on the bottom, once we move out of yellow, we hit green. So I think we're going to start finding our greens and our blues next. All right, so I've got my little space for yellow here, and I'm going to start pulling my greens. I've also got some kind of greeny blues. Blue is actually coming next, so you can throw those right over there. And you can see just this sorting is creating another kind of color wheel in itself. We've got some nice light greens and dark greens. Got those blue greens. Now remember, everyone's eyes are a little different, and what you might see as one color, someone else might perceive a little differently. So this could be a fun discussion to have with people at home. You could also try to come up with names for some of these colors. I remember when I was little, I really liked when Crayola would have a name your own color contest, and you could send in ideas you had for naming new colors. I always thought that was really fun. These are some really dark blues. So we're moving into some of those nice blues now. And it's hard to tell with some of these crayons because of how they look when they're peeled. Our purples and our blues may look really similar, so just do your best, look closely. We definitely have a lot of dark blue. I'm also seeing some colors in here that we didn't talk about on the color wheel, and those can be fun to include as well. I know many of my friends at K280 are a big fan of pink, so if we want to, we can start a little section for pink in there after the purple. That's an orange. Okay, and let's see what else we have in here. We've got a little bit of white. I can throw that in there too. And, ooh, we've got a little fancy gold piece. We have some nice grays. Okay. So I'm just taking my time and really taking a look. I think we have some black. One thing you could do if you're really unsure about what the color is, especially with these really dark crayons, is you could get a piece of paper to test it out. And I can see when I use it on the paper, it definitely is black. So I'm going to put that black in there next to my gray. And that one I can see is a purple. So it's going to go over here. Purple again. So that could be a good trick if you're having trouble. We've got a nice dark blue there. This could be a project too. If you get tired after doing a few steps of the project, you could always save the rest of the project for another day, because this is a lot of work in itself. Okay, so you're going to keep going on your sorting until all the crayons have been sorted by color. Okay, so we're going to make sure we preheat the oven now for melting the crayons. We're going to put it on 350 degrees. Okay, and let's give that a little time to heat up. Okay, so it's important that our crayons are in small enough pieces for them to fit in the little baking tray. So there's a few ways you can break your crayons. If you want to use your muscles, you can just take the crayons and try to snap them into smaller pieces. Okay, you could do this with a grown-up too. Another way that we can break the crayons is by taking a bag of some kind. I'm going to use this Ziploc bag because it's kind of a thick one, but you could also always use any like plastic shopping bags you have around the house and put them in. All right, I'm going to throw those crayons down on the floor. I'm going to use my heel and stomp. Okay, so another way you can break up your crayons is you can have a grown-up cut the crayons up for you. Again, this is something that a grown-up has to do. I don't want any of my students at home trying to do this by themselves. For that, you'll need some kind of sharp knife, a cutting board, and just like you're chopping up vegetables, a grown-up can get in there and break the crayons up into smaller pieces. Just do a few crayons at a time. Again, these don't need to be really small pieces. They just have to be small enough to get into the baking tins. Okay, so we're back. Now it's time to get our baking cups prepped. We're gonna get a little oil. I'm gonna use a little on a paper towel because I don't wanna get all greasy right now. And I'm just going to oil up the insides and the bottoms of these cups. Now we get to the part where we get to choose our colors that we're going to be putting together in the baking tins to make our crayons. So in true art teacher fashion, I'm going to go over some of our color combinations that we've learned this year. So I think first I'm going to make a warm color crayon. So I'm going to be using red and orange and yellow in one of these tins. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a little of each of those colors. You don't need to be filling these containers to the top. I would say aim for about halfway up the little cup with your colors. A little bit of everything in there. Okay. And because I have so much orange, I'm going to add a little bit more of those on the top. Great. Okay. And now we can make a cool color crayon. So our cool colors again are green, blue, and purple. Let's get those cool colors in there. I'm adding some purple, some blue, some green. If you want, you can get your hands in there and mix them up a little bit in the cup. Okay. And now we've got a cool color and a warm color. We could also think about making a crayon that's just made up of secondary colors. We learned about secondary colors when we started using the color wheel to learn how to mix paint colors. So my students learned that our secondary colors are green, purple, and orange. And the way we remembered how to mix the secondary colors was to look at what two colors were on either side of the secondary color we were trying to mix. So for example, if I was trying to mix the color orange, I could look to the left and see that red was there, and I could look to the right and see that yellow was there, and that reminded me of the two colors that I need to mix together to make orange, and we could do that for each one. So if I'm trying to make purple, another secondary color, I can see that blue is on one side of purple and red is on the other side, and if I put blue and red together, I will get purple. And then the same goes for green. If we turn the wheel around again, I can see yellow is on one side of green and blue is on the other side of green. And if I put blue and yellow together, I'll get the color green. So let's go ahead and make a secondary crayon. And my secondary crayon is going to be made up of orange and green and purple. Let's not forget the purple. And maybe now we should just have some fun with colors. Maybe we want to make a crayon that has a little of each color in it. So I'm going to do some red, some orange, some yellow, some greens. We can get our blue and our indigo and violet in there. Mix those guys up. I always like pink and green together. Put some greens in there and some pinks. You know, maybe you only had enough crayons at home to make 1 or 2 new crayons, and that's totally fine too. Remember, these are going to be pretty big crayons that you can hold, and you'll be able to use them for a long time. And maybe you want to have a crayon that's just one color, and that's fine too. Like, for example, I have a bunch of different shades of orange, so maybe I'll make a crayon that's just made up of these orange pieces, and that could be nice to have as well, because there'll be some different shades within that one orange color crayon. Okay, so your oven should have been on now for about 10 minutes to get nice and hot. Remember, it's at 350 degrees. I'm gonna put my trays onto this larger tray so it's just easier for me to get them out when they're done. Okay, and I'm gonna open up the oven. Remember, this is a grown-up job. I'm gonna carefully put them in, and remember, this is an experiment, so we're gonna leave these in, let's say, for maybe 3 minutes to start at 350 degrees, and then we'll do a check to see how they're melting, okay? Okay, so we're gonna do a quick check to see how our crayons are melting. It's been about 4 minutes. So I'm gonna open the oven. Again, this is a grown-up job. I'm gonna pull my tray forward. We can see the crayons are definitely starting to melt, but they're not melted enough yet. So I'm gonna push those guys back in. We're gonna close the oven and we're gonna give it a few more minutes. It's been about 15 minutes now that the crayons have been in the oven. So let's do a check and see if we're done. And it looks like we've got a full melt happening, okay? So I'm gonna keep this tray really level as I pull this out of the oven because I don't want these to tip. I'm gonna really carefully put it up here. And now it's important that we give these new crayons enough time to totally cool down and become solid again, okay? If we come in closer, we can start to see all the different color combinations that are happening. If you're really excited about the crayons being dry and finished setting, you can always put them into the freezer to try to speed up the cool down time, but I'm gonna just let my crayons sit here on the oven until they're totally solid. So our crayons have been out of the oven now for over an hour. They're totally cool to the touch. I'm gonna just give them a little twist, and I can see they're already nice and loose. And then I'm gonna gently turn this over. I'm gonna pop them right out on that tray head underneath. Same with these guys. All right, so we've now got a whole bunch of crayons. I'm gonna put them in this little container for now, and we can bring them over to the table and then we can test them out. So now we get to test out our crayons. I've pulled out a few of the first ones we put together. This one, remember, was our cool colors, so it had the purple, blue, and green in it. This one was our warm colors with orange, yellow, and red. And this was our secondary colors crayon that had purple, orange, and green in it. So let's test one of these out. With these crayons, it's really easy to grip them. This is a great way for our students to work on their fine motor. You can turn them in different directions. And remember, just like with normal crayons, your color is going to be richer and brighter the more pressure you use. So it can be fun to try out different ways of holding the crayon, and you want to use a lot of pressure as you make your marks on your paper. You can see what happens if you twist around to different sides, if you start to get different colors. This one even looks like it has a little glitter in it. So this is fun if you have a nice big piece of paper. If you don't have white paper, you could always use an old newspaper. And the more you use these crayons, their shape is going to change. So don't be afraid to turn it over. You can see what happens if you try to press. See what different kinds of marks you can make. Maybe we can test, oh, this one looks fun. This is the one that had a lot of green and pink. Maybe you want to think about letters that you know. Maybe you want to think about making a piece of artwork that you can send in the mail to someone, or maybe a nice sign that you could put up in your window. Or maybe you want to think about getting some little envelopes that you can mail, and maybe you want to send some of these crayons to some of your friends who you can't see right now to give them something fun they can use at home. Seeing what happens if I hold the crayon in different ways. Maybe you want to see what it feels like to use a different hand. I normally draw with my left hand, but I'm going to see what happens with my right hand. See if that feels different. Maybe it feels harder. Now, if you have different kinds of baking tins at home, I only had these round pans. It could be fun to see what happens if you have different shaped tins. But just have fun with it and explore what you can do with your crayons, and these will last you a long time. So thanks for tuning into this video. You can always subscribe to my channel, Art with Miss Rachel, and I'll see you next time.